Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Mike, you've been with us a couple of times on the podcast, and you've shared some really great information, but today you've got a question and you wanted to see if maybe we could help you. What's going on?
Hey, thanks, Dan. By the way, I love your podcast. I think the wealth of information. So thanks.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
Time. Appreciate it. But anyway, my quick question is, I'll try to make it quick. I'm looking to buy a duplex, an over and under, and the tenants have been there for anywhere from the two of them, anywhere from 6 to 10 years, and the owner has never raised the rents on them. The rents are way low. But the tenants are good tenants. They seem to take care of the place and all that. My question to you is, or to the audience, is what do people think about as soon as if I buy the place to raise the rents right away to the market value? Should I work it up a little bit? Go a little now, a little later, or should I just leave it alone? I'd love to know what people's inputs are. So
I guess, are you afraid that if you were to raise the rent that maybe the tenants would leave?
Yeah, that would be something that I guess they would. I don't know if I'm afraid of that or not, but yeah, that would be something that could happen. And then it would take that longer to get the rented and all that.
Let's take a look at some numbers on this building. If Mike does absolutely nothing, if he just closes on the building and starts collecting rent from the current tenants, he's going to profit about $200 per month. If he raises the rent up to the current market rent, he's going to be profiting $600 a month. And that's a pretty big difference. But the risk is if the tenants either don't want to pay the new rent or maybe they can't afford the new rent and they leave, he's going to have to put some money into fixing the rentals up. He estimates that each side probably needs about $3,000 worth of work to bring it up to rentable standards. So he's going to have to put some money into the building, and he's probably going to have some vacancy as he's doing the work and as he's marketing for a new tenant. So that's the dilemma. Do you do nothing and make $200 a month, or do you maybe take some risk that the tenants may leave and you're going to have to put some money into the building? To help Mike decide what to do, we're going to talk to a couple of different landlords and see what they would do if they were in this situation. So let's take a real quick break. We'll come right back and we will talk to our first landlord. A good deal on a rental property isn't going to last very long. To win properties today, you need to move quickly when a deal comes on the market, but it takes time to analyze a property. I want to let you know about an app where you can analyze deals on your phone in seconds. It's called Ask Rick. That's RIC for Rental Income Calculator. You can analyze a deal with the push of a button. You can figure out the rent, your mortgage payment, your expenses, and figure out the cash flow. If the numbers make sense, you can make an offer right there on the app, or you can send a calendar invite to your agent to see the property in person. Ask Rick is currently offering a free 7-day trial. Just search for Ask Rick in the App Store or go to Just Ask Rick. That's RIC. JustAskRick.com. Whether you've been buying rental properties for years or you're looking to buy your very first rental property, the very first thing you want to do before you go out and find a great deal is to figure out your financing. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. Chaley has a special limited time offer just for our listeners. She will pay for your appraisal up to $500 when you close a loan with her. Just mention you heard about this on the Rental Income Podcast. If you want more details or if you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056. Let's start off talking to Anthony Russell. So, Anthony, what do you think? What do you think Mike should do?
Wow. So yeah, that's a good question. I've run into this issue more than once, and it is probably a common issue for most owner operator landlords that you're going to buy a property and there's going to be people living there. So what I did in that scenario, and I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer in this case, but what I did in that scenario is, look, obviously the rent has to come up because it's an investment for you. You need the rent to go up, but you don't want to alienate these tenants and just, kick them out by, pricing them out of the apartment. So what you might try and do is, instead of doing all at once, incrementally raise it. And that's what I did, and it worked out. Over the course of 3 or 4 years, I raised this tenant's rent, and I tell them in advance. Don't spring it on them. Don't wait until it's renewal time to be like, hey, by the way, your rent's going up $50 or whatever. Tell them 6 months out. Empower them to make the choice. Say, hey, look, when your lease is up, I'm stuck in a hard spot. I have to raise the rent in order for the building to be profitable. I'm sure you understand that. But I don't want to hurt you or cause like a rent shock to you. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to raise it, X amount of percent each year until we have achieved, market value, and tell them what the market value is. That way they have an expectation, and then they can make the choice if they want to continue to stay there. That's how I've handled it in the past, and I think it's a really good way to go.
I like that. And did your tenant end up staying, or did they leave when you started raising the rent on them?
They are actually my longest tenants.
Awesome.
They never left. I still have them. They were one of the first buildings I bought, and yeah, they are my longest tenants.
And so did you just kind of stair step the rent a little bit every year? Like you told them, okay, well, the first year we're going to raise you $50 or whatever, and the next year another $50. Is that how you did it?
So they were actually extraordinarily low. When I took the building over, obviously I had to honor their lease that was in place until the end of their lease. But immediately I knew that there was an issue. The market rent at the time, I want to say, was like $550 or something like that. And they were paying like $300. So it was definitely low. And I told them right away, I said, hey, look, obviously I have to honor your lease. But this is where the market value is. Now, you guys are long-term tenants, so I'm not going to raise you all the way up to the market value. I'll give you a 10% discount or whatever. And then I'm not going to raise it immediately up to that. I'm going to stair step it up. So, and here's the increments. And that's what I did. And it worked out great. We got them up to market value or just under market value. And I keep them there. Rent continues to go up in the area. And every so often I raise their rent. There's no problem from them because they know they're getting a deal from me. And I'm happy taking a little bit less to keep tenants in there that I know aren't going to destroy the property and are going to be a steady stream of income.
Our next landlord is Eric Gerard. So, Eric, what do you think?
If I were him, I would start off with a few months, 6 months, and see how good they are as tenants. See if they do pay on time, because a lot of times you're going off the seller's word and it's not quite the same. They want to sell the place. And then if they are really as good as the seller said, I would only raise it a little bit and keep them, but I would get yearly leases. I never do month-to-month leases because every place has their own rental cycles, and you don't want to have a vacant property at the time of the year where nobody's going to want to look. You want to do it where everyone's looking to get maximum amount of rent.
That makes sense. So maybe, have it come up in the spring or the summer or whenever the busiest time is. That makes a lot of sense.
If it works out, I would, just have small increases year by year, and but you don't know what you're going to get with new tenants. They might pay that extra rent, but they might be a hassle, even if they passed all the requirements. Because a present landlord's not going to say, they were a pain in the butt and they cost me more money than they should have. They're going to say, oh, they paid on time, they were good tenants, etc. They want them out of there. So you don't know what you're going to get with new tenants.
That's true. Good point. Next up is Chris Tesario. So, Chris, what do you think?
Okay, so I always heard that you shouldn't buy a house and tenants together. But I did do that one time, and I still have the house. And the tenant was in at a lower than what I would have charged an average rent. But they were long-term renters. Her parents actually lived next door. So I know she would stay there for quite a while. So I went in and left the rent as it was for the first year. And after a year, I raised it by $25. I left it that way for another year. And now I'm going into year 3. I let it go last year because of the corona. Year 3 now, I'm raising it another $25. So I'm incrementally moving it up, and not enough to cause her any burden. And if she would talk to me and say, hey, look, this is really going to crush me, I would, maybe ratchet it down a little bit. But I think a $25 a month increment every year is not, life threatening, especially if you look at other costs of, your cable, your electric, and I've incurred increase in my property taxes and insurance along the way also. And the fact that this, property came to me at a lower than average rent.
Did you talk to her and tell her I'm going to be raising your rent $25 every year, or did you just take it year by year?
I took it year by year because she was a little nervous when I first bought it. She thought that I was going to put her out. And I said, no, I have no intention on putting you out. I mean, you've been there for the last owner. The owner just didn't want to be a landlord any longer. They didn't have any problem with the girl. They just weren't cut out to be landlords. They were school teachers, and they just wanted to get rid of the house. And the girl was nervous that I was going to put her out. And she had a small child. I think that's why she wanted to live next door to her parents, because she relied on them for babysitting. So I thought, no, I would never put her out because she's going to stay there as long as her parents, and her parents are homeowners.
Do you think you could have gone more than $25? Like, do you think that maybe if you went up $50, she would have thought,
I think 50 would have been too much for her.
Okay. So
I think 50 is like, from what and again, I'm no expert, from what I heard, 3 to 5%. And at that rate, I'm thinking, that's why I came to $25.
Next up is Quentin DeSouza. So, Quentin, what do you think?
Well, I think you have to decide whether you have a hobby or you run a business. Because if you have a hobby, then don't raise the rent. If that's what you have, then that makes it a lot easier for you. That's fine. But if you run a business, then you need to make sure that your business is optimized. That includes income and expenses. Your income is obviously not optimized, so you need to make a decision. And I would suggest that you bring it up to whatever the market rent is, because you can. And you will find tenants at that market rent who will care for the property just the same. Don't think that you're going to find somebody else that is that a higher rent is going to look after it any less than somebody who's paying a lower rent. It's a scarcity mentality, and you don't want to have that in business.
Do you think it's better to just go to the tenants and say, look, this is the new rent, this is the market rent? Or do you think it's better to maybe increase it over a number of years or a number of months?
Well, I mean, if you're in a state that allows that, because where I am, you can't do that. But if I were in a state that allowed me to do that, I would just have a frank discussion with the tenant, letting them know that this is what the plan is. This is what we want to do. If this is something that you would like to work with us on, then I'm happy to work with you. Maybe you meet with them and you, instead of, bringing it up $300, you bring it up $275 or something like that. Whatever the amount is that makes sense, and just have a frank discussion. This is where you have to do the eat the frog type of activities every week, right? This is one of those type of activities that you would do. And the more of these that you do, the better you'll get at what you do. So, and you'll grow as a person, because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, I really like that. I think you got to think about this as a business. Next up is Albert Koo. So, Albert, what do you think?
So I think it all comes down to the return rates and how much you would want to optimize for that. One thing to consider in this scenario would be, let's say if you raise the rent and the tenant decides to move out, what would be the opportunity cost you have lost? Like, for example, you might need to account for some vacancy time, and you might want to account for leasing fee. If you hire a property manager, you will have to pay for, getting this relisted and advertised, etc. So if you take all that into account, and raised rent would be, you are happy to cover all of those losses, and it's something that you feel more like it's your goal, it meets your goal, then I think that should be something that you would do. Personally, I tend to prefer a long-term tenants because they take care of the units properly, and give me less headache, if I have to, always have something to think about, even though, I do have a property manager for all of my properties. And in this case, I would tend to get less noises. And of course, also personally, I don't care too much about the return rate, the numbers itself.
Let's check in with one more landlord. Aaron Millis is up next. So Aaron, what do you think?
I would say, I know nobody likes the answer, it depends, but if he is confident, I wouldn't just say confident, if based on what he's found about the property, if he's confident it could rent out for more soon, I mean, if there's a good tenant pool, I would say go ahead and either raise it. I wouldn't change it on their current lease. It's probably not possible, but as far as like as soon as he could or she could, I would say, yeah, go ahead and do it, because maybe they won't leave and maybe they will. And if they do, then at least then you could do whatever it is you wanted to the property. And then if it's a good property, in my mind, a good property is going to get rented. So I don't see the need of taking a lot, or maybe not a loss, but money off the table, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. And, we're in such a good market right now where rents are going up. You really should take advantage of it while you can. Because
and, I mean, I look at everything realistically as I can. Like, I would look at it from the tenant's perspective, like at least they had a great run of pretty low rent, and them having to now pay whatever the market rent is if they should stay there or move. It doesn't make you a bad guy. I would say it's what everybody else is doing, and unless you get a sweet deal like they have. But I mean, it runs out eventually, and it's your property, so you gotta get your money.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate you sharing that with us. After listening to everyone's input, I think that if this was my rental property, I would definitely be raising the rent. I really liked what Quentin said, that you've got to decide, is this a business or a hobby? In my case, my rentals are definitely a business, and I think that's really the right thing to do, is you've got to raise rent. Like Chris pointed out, your costs are going up, your insurance is going up, your taxes are going up. You've really got to raise rent. I really like Chris's idea of working with a tenant and finding out a number that's going to work for them. I think just going in there and saying you're raising the rent $200, take it or leave it, you really run the risk that the tenant might just leave. But if you can work with them, figure out a number that works for them, figure out a way that you can increase the rent over time to bring it up to the market rent, I think that's probably the best way to go. But I'm interested to see what you think. If you have an opinion on this, shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to send it over to Mike. My email address is dan@rentalincomepodcast.com. I want to thank our sponsor today for making this episode possible. It's Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. If you're looking to buy your very first rental property, or you want to add to your portfolio, definitely reach out to Chaley. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. Chaley has a special limited time offer just for our listeners. If you mention Rental Income Podcast, she will pay for your appraisal up to $500. If you want to find out more, or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. Make sure you subscribe or follow the show. We put out a new episode every single Tuesday, and if you subscribe, you'll get notified as soon as they come out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.